Hey, you. What you reading? Oh, I heard of that one. Is it good? Welcome to my channel. Hello friends. I am JC Berne, and this is Book Burning, a show where I talk about books, movies, comics, and occasionally other stuff, but I promise to never ever burn a book. And in case you couldn't tell from my incredibly theatric intro, we're going to talk about good books today, or literature, or something along those lines. The words in this topic are a little complicated. I promise I'll explain. Hopefully you'll stick with me for that explanation. Okay. I write genre fiction, science fiction, fantasy, superheroes, and if you go to the bookshop, if you go to a store, if you go to Amazon, you'll notice books are in categories, and my books will not be shelved in a Barnes & Noble at all, but if they were, they wouldn't be next to literary books. They wouldn't be next to Shakespeare and Moby Dick and lots of other books that are considered literature or literary fiction. That's a different category. And it's kind of a sore spot for genre writers and consumers in a way, because often it feels like literary fiction writers and the people who work in that field, the readers, the writers, the editors, the reviewers, who could prefer that type of fiction, are often somewhat looking down on people who read fantasy and science fiction. And within the science fiction and fantasy community, some books are considered more literary. So if you're reading Tolkien, you might look down, or either someone reading Tolkien or studying Tolkien might look down on someone who is reading or studying or writing something like, a pulp sci-fi story like mine, which is pulp science fiction. People who, if you went to an English, literature, if you were doing a PhD in English literature at a prestigious university, and you said, I want to study, Jim Starlin's Dreadstar, which is a comic book series, you'd have a much harder time getting that past your professors than if you were saying, I want to do a new reading of Hamlet. Okay, I'm not really that familiar with Hamlet scholarship, but just generally speaking, these things are often tiered, whether it's perceived or not. I'm not saying they actually are better or worse, but they are perceived that way, and many people treat it that way. If I'm at a party and I'm talking to people in my neighborhood, which is fairly affluent and upper class and mostly well-educated people, people say, "Oh, I heard you're a writer. What do you write?" If I say science fiction, very often their eyes glaze over and they look down on me as though I said, "Oh, I like to smoke crack on weekends." This isn't about my hurt feelings. This isn't that kind of video. I'm just saying there is value in sort of understanding what people mean when they say literary fiction. Does it mean anything? And I think it does. What does it mean, and how does it differ from genre fiction, like the kind of stuff I write and read? So to get to that, I know me. If you have watched any of my videos, I need to define terms. I need to understand what these words mean before I can say more about them. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to try to define terms, and I'm going to jump in with an incredible leap of hubris and try to define what we mean by good books or by literary books in a way that I think will be useful to readers of all kinds of fiction in understanding what it is that they like and don't like about what they're reading, and what other people mean when they say certain things. Okay. So I'm not going to start by defining what literary fiction is. I'm going to start with a more nebulous notion. And what I want us to talk about is something that we all sort of understand, but there's no one word for it. I'm going to say we can call it, what is a good book? And good in scare quotes, like good, or capital G, good. And the problem is this word can mean almost anything in different contexts, which makes it useless. If you say a good book and good can mean anything, the word doesn't mean then it doesn't mean anything. If it can mean anything, it doesn't mean anything. There's my tautology for the day. So I like a word that kind of captures what it is about certain books that have them listed among the great books of history. What is different? Why do we still read Shakespeare, 400 years later? Why is Moby Dick still being taught in school, whereas many other books were written at the same time as Moby Dick that we've never heard of? What made that book different? And I don't think it's just an accident, right? The Moby Dick must have qualities to it. Books like that, Shakespeare, Moby Dick, Hemingway books, they must have qualities to them that make them show up over and over again in course selections, why they're taught in schools, why they're referred to over and over again as paradigm examples of great literature. What do people mean by great literature? What is it that great literature has that people claim other books don't have? And good is not the best word to use because it means so many things to different people. I don't have a perfect word. I'm going to try going with quality. And I'm using this because there's a wonderful book, came out 50 years ago, which I didn't realize, Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, which is not about Zen at all, and is only peripherally about motorcycle maintenance. And it's about a fictional autobiography, which is a strange genre in itself. It's about a guy who tries to understand what good writing is. He's a creative writing professor, and in so doing, his obsessive search for the answer to this very complex question drives him insane. I don't know how realistic that is. I'm not a psychiatrist or a psychologist. It's a wonderful book. It's highly entertaining, whether you agree with it or not. It'll make you think. It's a great, fun book. Totally recommend it. But he uses the word quality, and I'm going to try to stick to that. So a quality book is what people consider a book that has the features or characteristics that might lead people to say it's a great book, as opposed to just an enjoyable book. And I'm not saying those two are incompatible. I'm just saying they're not the same thing. Books can be both. We'll get to that later. So what do we mean by a quality book? And here's where things get even more fun. There isn't a single answer. There's no definition of what makes a quality book versus a non-quality book. I can't give you a formula. I can't give you a measurement. It is somewhat subjective. There are different characteristics books can have that make them more or less quality. It's somewhat subjective, but not entirely subjective. Again, people sort of agree that Shakespeare is pretty great. You won't find a ton of people who study literature who say Shakespeare was crap. No one should read that crap. People might say Shakespeare was racist and maybe we shouldn't, or anti-Semite, maybe we shouldn't read him for social reasons, but no one says the plays are crap, or almost no one. People generally appreciate something about the works that are considered great works of literature are generally acknowledged to be great works of literature. People might order them differently. Your top 10 list is, if you compare college professors, their top 10 lists aren't going to match, but they sort of have a lot in common. So people are clearly getting at something. And what are they getting at? And again, I think there's no one answer. There's no one thing that makes a book of quality, make a quality book, but quality books have some things from this list. So I'm going to make a list. I'm going to say all books that are quality have things, one or more things from this list at which they have a lot, and I'll get to the list in right now. So the first thing, and the thing that I believe, I'm not positive, I believe is most essential, most necessary to being a quality book is originality. The book has to do something sort of fresh and new and interesting that hasn't been done before, hasn't been done many times before. It has to have some kind of interesting take on characters, some kind of, the way it uses language is original and fresh. The structure is odd, interesting. It's teaching a lesson in a way that other books don't. If a book feels like a rehash of books you've read before, it's not a quality book in this sense. It's not going to be considered, it's not going to be up for great works of literature, best books of the year, if it's a rehash. That doesn't mean it's not fun to read. That's a different characteristic. That's a different category. Christopher, I forget the guy's name, Paolini or Aragon. Aragon's one of my favorite examples because it's a highly derivative book. It just steals right and left from other stuff. I don't think there's anything original in that book. But if you have it, but it was aimed at sort of a YA audience and people loved it because they hadn't read that other stuff, right? But people, scholars of the field, don't call that a high quality book, generally speaking, because it's so derivative. Books that are of quality need to do new stuff, some new things. Not everything is new. So that's the first thing, and I think it's necessary. I don't think any derivative book can really be considered a quality book. I'm willing to reconsider that. I'm not positive. Okay, quality. Second thing, and that I think helps a book be considered a quality book, is beautiful prose. And this is one of those things that sounds very subjective. Well, what's beautiful prose? What you like may not be what that person likes, but it's not as subjective as it sounds. By beautiful prose, what I mean is, if you just read individual sentences from that text, or at most individual paragraphs, but not larger chunks, they will seem beautiful. They will seem to have aesthetic value. You will say, well, that's clever, that's interesting. It will draw you in at just individual senses. You can just pick up a book like a Shakespeare play and just open up to a random, pull up a couple random lines, and they will have a quality, an aesthetic value to them, a loveliness to them. And you can compare it to lots of stories have very pedestrian, non-exquisite, non-beautiful prose. That may make for a great story, but the prose isn't anything special. The sentences aren't special. There's a video that went around, a terrible video. Not a video, it was an article, I'm sorry, criticizing Brandon Sanderson. And the article was terrible. I'm not going to get into that today. But one of the things the guy did is he pulled up Brandon Sanderson's books and he pulled random sentences out and said, look how pedestrian anyone could have written these sentences. And that's true. That's the thing about Brandon Sanderson. No one really says his prose is great. If you read a random Brandon Sanderson sentence, you wouldn't go, oh, the guy who wrote this was clearly a highly skilled author, a genius. You would never say that about an individual sentence in a Brandon Sanderson novel. Maybe about none of his sentences, or at least very few. Most of his sentences are very straightforward. They get to the point. They look like anybody could have written it. He's making a wonderful story. I'm not saying anyone could write the Cosmere. I'm saying anyone could write a sentence out of the Cosmere. I could. I don't think my books have great prose. I think if you look at my books, you're going to find very few sentences that will seem clever or beautiful or interesting on their own. I think I tell a good story. You can disagree, but I think I'm an example of someone who does not have great prose. Tamsin Muir, Gideon the Ninth. I thought there were structural problems. I generally love Gideon the Ninth. I have not read the sequels yet. I generally loved it. But one thing is, if you read it, you will find that individual sentences are exquisite. They're beautiful. She uses words. She picks out words and uses really unusual words in ways that are, you think, I've never seen that word used in that context before, but I still completely understand what that means in this sentence. It's totally clear to me, but the word choice is just, it's lovely. It's not the word I would have picked or anyone else would have picked to use in that sentence. The structures of the sentences are interesting and intriguing and draw you in. Any paragraph from Gideon the Ninth is love. Any paragraph from Gideon the Ninth has more loveliness to it than all the paragraphs in all of my books. I'm not trying to deprecate myself. I'm just saying good prose. Now, I'm not saying that a quality book has to have exquisite prose, but many do, and that's the justification for many quality books. This is a quality book because it has exquisite prose. Okay. Social impact. Not all quality books have to have social impact or have a social lesson, but many books are considered quality because they bring awareness of some social topic that's important. The Jungle by Upton Sinclair's example I always come back to. It's a very famous book. I'm not saying you should read it. It was about the slaughterhouse industry in Chicago, and it opened people's eyes to things going on in the slaughterhouse industry that they didn't know about. It was almost like journalism, and it was important because of that. You can look at things like a show like The Wire, open people's eyes to what things, social conditions in Baltimore they might not have been aware of. That in itself made it of higher quality. It was also a quality show in other ways, but that in itself lends. Not every quality book has to have a social impact, but that is something that can make a book of higher quality if it has a social impact. Alongside that, we can say that a book has lessons. It teaches us something. It helps us understand something that's often very hard to put into words. Ironic, because it's a book made up of words that teaches us something that you can't put into words. Helps us understand something about the human condition. Helps us feel a greater awareness of something about what it means to be a person, what it means to be human, what love means. It leaves us, after reading the book, we feel we understand more. Not technical things, but existential things. That is something that makes a book of higher quality. Books of higher quality are often books that inspire strong feelings, and especially if it's feelings that maybe are unpleasant or not enjoyable. A book that just gives you an enjoyable feeling, that's kind of easier, it's a lower bar, and we usually, a book that just makes you horny, a book of erotica, that by itself is not usually considered something that makes a book quality. I think because it's I don't want to stray too far about why, but books that elicit strong feelings are generally considered to be of higher quality. Books of higher quality generally have layered meaning. When you read the book, it may have a superficial plot where you understand very quickly, but there's layers to the understanding of it. There are books where if you go back and think about them more, you will understand more about them. If you just have a book about like a bunch of space marines running into a moon and like gunning down space orcs and like saving a bunch of like people who are going to be food for space orcs, that might be a very fun book. But if you go back and think about that later, what did that really mean? What are the implications of the fact? It wasn't trying to tell you anything. It was just a fun action book about shooting space orcs, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. But that's not a quality book. Quality book is one where you can revisit. You can study it in class. You can have discussions about it on YouTube. You can have a study group. When you think about it, you will uncover a complexity of meaning. I'm in a little group on YouTube. We talk about Berserk, which is a manga. And one of the things that I think makes Berserk to be of such high quality, and it's regarded as being a very high quality, even though it's a manga, people think of it as very literary. It's partially because the characters are very complex, and the more you think about what they did, and the more you think about and revisit and reread and think about the subtleties of the plot and the characters, you develop a deeper layered understandings of what's happening. It looks on the surface like just a guy cutting down demons with a ridiculous giant sword, but it's actually saying some very sophisticated and hard to piece out things about what friendship means, about what it means for humans to have a purpose, and it bears examination. The more you think about it, the more you will uncover. Whereas again, there are lots of books where you read it and you get it. You read a romance novel and you get it. You're done. It's enjoyable, but thinking about it again, you're not going to discover anything new. You're not going to get another fresh perspective on it. It's just, it is what it is. And again, quality means layered meaning, sophistication, depth in those senses. And again, quality books, the great books, don't have to have all of these things, but they have to have some of them. And I think they have to be original. And that's what makes a quality book. Okay, so that's the first part. What is a quality book? And I think those are the major categories. I'm not saying that's exhaustive. There might be some other aspect to what makes books quality books that I haven't covered. I'm not saying that's the full list. That's everything I could think of. It's not really what I study. I'm not a literary scholar, but that's a big start to it. Okay, so I'm going to contrast that with another rough category, not a genre, but a category of books or a quality that books can have of being, I use different words. I'm going to try going with fun. Is a book fun? And fun is something like being a page turner. People call books a page turner. Once you start the book, you want to keep reading. It draws you in. It makes you want to continue the book. If the book is done, it makes you want to pick up the next book in the series. It gives you whatever kind of experience will make you keep reading and keep paying for the next book. And this is one reason why fun is associated with commercial success. Fun books are generally going to sell more because they're fun, right? If a book is designed to make you want to turn the pages and buy the next book, it's going to sell a lot of books. And fun is relative to the audience. What's fun for me may not be fun for you. I don't really read YA. Terribly fun YA book is not going to draw me in and make me want to buy the next one. But a fun YA book will make a YA audience pick up the next one and recommend it to their friends. And fun can come from a lot of places depending on the type of book it is. Usually the prose has to be at least at a certain level. The terrible prose is going to make a book unfun to read for most readers. But it doesn't necessarily have to be exquisite. It has to be at least okay. You have to have some elements of surprise, but not necessarily too much. You have to have some twists and turns, but not too much. On the other hand, it can be a little bit repetitive. It can be a little bit unoriginal. People often like reading sort of very similar things rehashed over and over again. Romance readers read a lot of romance books. A lot of them have a lot of similarities. Not every one is a fresh reinvention of the romance genre. That's not, people who read multiple books a week aren't looking for a fresh reinvention with every book. You can't do that. It's literally impossible. No pun intended on the literally. Sorry. So a fun book is a book that draws you and makes you turn the pages. Think of pulp science, think of Tarzan novels. Tarzan novels were, you can think of it as, first of all, Tarzan was horribly racist, but that's beside the point. Those books were terribly engaging. They really drew you in. You wanted to read the next one. How's he going to get out of this situation? It wasn't terribly original after the first couple, right? It was rehashing the same sort of stories, but drew you in, made Edgar Rice Burroughs, I'm sure, just a ton of money, which I'm sure was his goal. Anything pulpy, anything where typically if there's a long, someone's indie publishing and they're doing rapid release, they're shooting for fun. They're shooting for something that's going to draw you in and pull you into the next thing. Engaging and relatable characters, or characters that you love to hate. Either one or both in the same book will make a book more fun. Faster pace is generally more fun, generally speaking. Generally speaking, fun is not 1,000 pages or almost nothing happens. That can be good, that can be quality, but that's generally not as fun. Maybe there are exceptions, but generally speaking. So fun is what I'm not trying to put down fun. Just so we're clear, I'm trying to write fun. My goal in life is to write fun books. Not so much so that I can sell more copies, but because that is what I like to write and read. I'm shooting for fun. So I'm not putting that down. It may sound like I am. I hope not. Sometimes our language is a little charged, and I apologize if that comes across. But fun is engaging. It pulls you in. Okay, so some books are fun, and some books are quality. And I think some books are both. And it gets also a little more complicated because to some audiences, quality is fun. To certain people, they really only enjoy turning the page if they're getting literary quality out of it. They only like turning the page. They're not only drawn in by exquisite prose, by stark originality, by deep, meaningful lessons. That's the only thing that makes them want to read the next chapter. They don't care about how many bullets the Space Marines have left and when they're going to pull out the grenade launcher for the big finale. Like, that will never intrigue certain people. So to certain people, literary is fun, but to a lot of people, quality and fun are distinct. And they can go together. Lots of books are quality and fun. Lots of science fiction books are considered to have a lot of literary or quality value. So what do I mean? Literary fiction is fiction that is trying to be quality first and fun after. Either not at all, it doesn't care about whether it's fun or not, or the fun is secondary. Its primary goal is something that makes it quality. The primary goal is exquisite prose, and if you enjoy it, great, but really, we're going for exquisite prose. The primary quality is we're going for a deep, meaningful understanding of life. And if you happen to have fun reading it, great, but the goal is the quality. And genre fiction, and non-literary fiction, is like science fiction, fantasy, generally speaking, belongs on the science fiction shelf if its goal is to be fun first. And the literary goals are secondary. They can be there. Ursula Le Guin was not just trying to write fun, pulpy books. On some level, she was trying to write fun books that had literary value. They had quality. Maybe every writer on some level is trying to write quality books. Some more than others. For me, I don't know. It's not important to put a number on it. But we can clearly see different writers are trying different things. I think, in a way, Patrick Rothfuss is in trouble because he's trying to be very, very literary. He can't make his third book because if he's just trying to write a fun book, it's easier. That's my guess. I don't really know. Patrick, I'm not trying. I don't know why I'm throwing crap on Patrick Rothfuss. That's not fair to me. But there are certainly fun books that have a lot of quality. But if they were trying to be fun first and the quality was secondary, then they belong. Then that's the non-literary thing, and literary is trying to be quality first. So if you read a book, you can usually tell. Like if there's lasers, laser swords, and like spaceships and wizards and dragons, that's fun stuff. That's usually you'd have to stretch to put that into example of a true literary book that's primary overriding goal is to have quality. I don't know why you'd have a wizard in there. Maybe you could. Maybe there's a counterexample. Put it in comments. Show me some counterexamples of books with wizards and lasers and starships that where fun was not the first goal or not the primary goal. Maybe there are some, but I haven't found too many. But clearly there are writers in the field where the literary aspirations are closer to equal. But literary books, the books that you're going to find on a literary shelf, the books are the people who are trying to end up being taught in regular college courses where they're like, I want every high school kid in 50 years to have my book on their curriculum so they can all hate me. If that's your goal, you're probably not writing like a Star Wars film adaptation. Right? That's a book that's supposed to be fun. It's not really supposed to be quality. The quality is a secondary aspect to it. And I'm not saying that you should read quality books or that you should like them more. I don't. I went through a phase in college or after college where I tried to read only literary books. I tried to read quality books, and I put aside science fiction and fantasy and comics for years, and I tried to read the books that were considered great works of literature for a while. And I did not like it, and I very deliberately stopped and went back and started reading comic books again. That was my path as a human, okay? So I'm not saying you should read literature, or even that you should read fun books that are on the more literary. I'm not saying you should. Oh, who was the other? There's another author. I'm not gonna remember her name right now. Whose books she writes sci-fi, but it's considered very literary. My former roommate, John Chu, Hugo Award-winning writer John Chu. If you read his books, he doesn't write books. He writes short stories. I don't think he has a book out. Wonderful, but hugely really quality. The prose is gorgeous. The originality is striking. They're lovely stories. But he's clearly trying to write quality stories. Are they fun? They're absolutely fun. But he's clearly on the, treading the line of, is this really science fiction anymore, or is it too quality to be? And by quality, I mean having those goals. I think he's still sci-fi, but you don't need me to make that distinction. I'm not trying to be a gatekeeper and say someone is or isn't science fiction. I'm trying to say, generally speaking, when someone talks about literary works, literary fiction, this is what they mean. They mean things that are aspiring to quality. And when they say non-literary, they mean things that are whose goal isn't quality. Its goal is other stuff, and that other stuff is, to me, it's fine. It's great. Again, that's what I write. I don't write literary works. I don't write for quality first. I hope there's some in there. I always hope there's some layering. I hope there's some meaning where if you think about what's ascending again a month after reading it, I hope you'll realize something you didn't get the first time through. I do hope that's there, but that's not my primary goal. So I think that completely answered the question for once and for all, what is literary fiction? I'm sure there is nothing else to say. I'm kidding. Feel free to object, add, or detract from my arguments. Answer some, say why you disagree, that's fine. Come up with counterexamples. Maybe there are counterexamples I haven't thought of. But I think this is generally speaking what people mean by these words. And by being clear about what they mean, it can help us discuss those things and help you figure out what you want. Do you want? Because I think it helps us all if you can say how literary is a book in a review. Because some readers will see that and go, okay, that's not the book for me. And some readers will see that and go, that might be the book for me. And either one is fine. I want people to have fun reading. That's my overarching purpose. How can I help people have more fun reading? I can write books that I hope are fun to read, and then I can have videos like this that I help enhance your reading pleasure. So I think that's all I have to say on this topic. I am, again, J.C. Berne, writer, author of Wistful Ascending and several other books, some of which have yet to come out. And I should be writing right now, but instead I'm doing this video because I'm the king of procrastination. And I hope you have a great week. And please disagree with me in comments. Tell me what you think. I'm always happy to hear from you guys. Thanks. Take care.